The South Asian diaspora is significant, with over 18 million people living outside their countries of origin. In America, South Asians make up 12% of the workforce, and South Asian women are an important part of that. Today, we're going to be talking with one of the founders of the largest professional organizations advocating for South Asian women, so stay tuned. Hey everybody, welcome back to another Future Tech video podcast. Today we're talking with Mythili Sankaran, one of the founders of Neythri and the Neythri Futures Fund. Mythili worked in tech for years, but when she was attending professional women's leadership groups, she didn't see South Asian women represented. She also knew how limited South Asian women's access to capital was. This was the impetus behind Neythri, a community to support the professional aspirations and to advance the careers of South Asian women. And Mythili is here to tell us all about it. Welcome, Mythili.
Thank you, Chris and Sandesh, for having me here.
So, before we get into the nuts and bolts of everything, I just want to get a little bit of your journey. And, if you could talk a bit about how, where you came from and how you got to where you decided to start these organizations, that'd be awesome to hear.
I grew up in India. I spent the first 21 years of my life in India, came here as an immigrant grad student. But if I look back, even my growing up in India was an interesting experience because I grew up not what one would call mainstream India, but I grew up in a small state called Goa, which was under the Portuguese rule until 1961. So had a very, very strong European Portuguese influence. I went to a missionary convent school run by nuns. So here I was, at home. We were very traditional South Indian family. And outside of the home, I was exposed to, lots of diverse thinking and experiences. And this was still India in the 70s, where it was a conservative society. But I'm very grateful. My parents had the right balance of being conservative and value-based parenting, but at the same time progressive enough to give me and my sister in particular a lot of freedom. I was very, very interested in the sciences growing up and was confident I'd be a doctor. I was obsessed, in fact, about studying medicine. But ironically, after living 15 plus years in Goa, just as I completed my 12th grade, my dad's work transferred him out of that city where we lived in Goa. And my dad put his foot down and said that I couldn't stay back and live in a dorm and study medicine. So for a kid that was so obsessed about studying medicine because I wanted to be a surgeon, I was basically told, well, sorry, you have admission to med school, but you're not going to study medicine because you have to move with us to Mumbai. And so I enrolled to study physics and stats and math, thinking, as a medical doctor, I'm never going to study physics. I always enjoyed physics as a subject. So I took 3 subjects that I thought I would never have the chance to study in detail. And the irony of it all is, of course, I continued and I majored in physics. But, my dad's philosophy always was that adversity is what brings the best out of you. And if you are truly smart and good, you go make lemonade or whatever out of the lemons that are dished out to you. I found my passion in physics. And I think that's what brought me here. And my dad continues to remind me that I'd probably still be in India, working as a doctor someplace instead of doing all the, amazing opportunities that I have here in this country. I'd probably give the entire credit to my mom for instilling that confidence in me. She basically told me that she was going to ensure support. And that if my dad needed convincing this time around, this was basically 3 years, after he had said no to living in the same country, just in a different state, right? So I think having that support or that sponsor made the world of difference. Yeah. My mom didn't go to college. So she was very, very ambitious though. for her girls. She was adamant that we be financially independent. So she broke a lot of the stereotypical behavior of women in India. She's very, very progressive in her thinking and super ambitious for us. And I think that helped shape my sister and me a great deal. And I chose to come here to the US for a PhD program in physics. I came to Texas. I remember having landed in Texas, in Lubbock, Texas. I came to Texas Tech University. I didn't even know. I had two large suitcases. One of them had clothes and books. The other had spices, by the way. Because I had no idea what one even got here, right?
Well, I got to say, that was a really spot-on move, because you were not going to find those spices in Lubbock, Texas.
Exactly. Those spices lasted me a good 8 months in that city. But I landed without knowing where I was going. I mean, I knew I had a dorm for a couple of months, a dorm room, but I didn't even know how I was getting from the airport to the dorm.
Oh, wow.
But
no Uber back then.
Yes, exactly. But I tell you, this young man showed up at the airport with my name on a placard. It was the Indian Student Association president. Apparently, the universities had the system where when they had foreign international students come in for grad school or undergraduate, I think, they immediately send the names to the various international association student organizations on campus. And they help you out. And so this guy showed up. He helped me with my bags. And the rest, as they say, is history. I had the opportunity, my very first summer, to go to one of the top research labs in this country. This was IBM's T.J. Watson Research Center in Yorktown Heights. I was like a kid in a candy shop, because there were Nobel laureates galore in this research center. And I couldn't believe that I got a lab and an office space amongst all of these names that I'd only read about in textbooks.
Well, I mean, you certainly not only came a long way physically, but like just coming from, your background and kind of sort of fighting through some of the cultural challenges that you have to come to America and do this. I mean, your mother sounds like a really impressive person. So it just goes to show you how instilling those kinds of values in your children really help them succeed. So,
absolutely.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit, you mentioned that, you kind of built a career, you got your education, you built a career here, and you started going to, a lot of these women's leadership networking events, and, you were kind of having a professional career, but you were seeing, a lot of, underrepresentation around, South Asian women.
It's interesting, right? If I look back when I came here, or even I would say the first 15 years of my professional career in this country, which was largely in tech. I started in research, moved into development, and then into product management, but all in technology, deep technology companies. Mm-hmm. I was used to being sort of the only in the room as a woman in tech. Yeah. I didn't see representation. I almost accepted it. I didn't even question it, to tell you the truth, because that's how it was. I learned to navigate the biases, both conscious and unconscious biases at that time. But I just, as I said, sort of accepted it as status quo. I never questioned it. I never tried to fight it at all. Because I also think, there were times when I benefited hugely as sort of being the minority woman in tech. I got into several amazing leadership programs, and I felt that they were all meritocracy based, and it was, possible to navigate biases, right? I think it was the later part of my life, especially, as an entrepreneur. And then as I got to a little bit more advanced, actually advanced is probably the wrong use of the word, really more later stages, I would say more experienced stage of my professional life, where I started to I joined several women's leadership networks, and these opportunities would present. that it became a lot more stark for me because my previous experience prior to joining some of these networks, or what led me to these networks, was my experience as an entrepreneur, as a tech entrepreneur in Silicon Valley, and trying to raise funding for my startup. Exposed me to the workings of the venture ecosystem,
Right.
and the very blatant bias and the lack of diversity there, right?
Yeah.
And so that's what led me to actively seek more women's networks, a community where I would feel more comfortable. And yeah, and comfortable I did feel for sure in many of these networks, and it was overall very positive and amazing, but I didn't see the representation that I would have liked to have seen,
Right.
especially in Silicon Valley. I didn't see women that looked like me. I would see very few and far in between South Asian women. And it was very stark. It was primarily white women. There were, in fact, other women of color, but not South Asian women. And that sort of really begged the question of representation for me, because I have two young girls, and I felt that if they, start to navigate these networks and they don't see representation, they don't see people like them, are they going to, get intimidated?
Right, right. Well, so that kind of caused you to start your own organization, right? Tell me a little bit about like what the underlying philosophy on that was, and how that all came together.
So it was all very organic, to tell you the truth. I didn't ever think I would be doing what I'm doing today, to tell you the truth. Somebody told me even 3 years ago, I would have completely denied it, because I didn't set out trying to, be an activist of sorts. Although this isn't activism per se, but it's definitely very purpose-driven and mission-driven. But as I said, in these networks, what would happen, and it happened repeatedly, was there would be a few handful of us South Asian women, and we would invariably reach out to one another and bond really, really well. Yes, we were part of the larger organization, and we very much considered ourselves part of that. It wasn't an either or. It was definitely an and function for sure. But these connections started to become a lot more meaningful and relevant and special. And so I think that opened my eyes even more, that our cultural context and our cultural backgrounds can be an amazing unifying factor. Right? And so what I started was really to then, and it started to really, really play on my mind, and it became very, very top of mind for me increasingly, right? And so I started to invite small groups of women to my backyard, because I really did not want this to be just something that bothered me or a whim in my head. I wanted it to be data-driven. I wanted it to be an informed exercise. And so I invited groups of women to my backyard with a very simple goal, just to have conversations and learn from others, if they felt as strongly as I did about creating a forum for South Asian women, where we got together just around our professional interests. This was not to talk about our kids, not to talk about family, not to talk about things outside of our professional interests. But I mean, those are not completely divorced from our professional journeys.
Sure.
Of course, they're integral, clearly. We all know that.
Yeah.
But really, this would be conversations around, where does one see ourselves 5 years from now? How does one get on a board? What does a board journey look like? How does one get to the C-suite? What is an experience when you get to the C-suite, right? These are not conversations that most women even contemplate, let alone have. So the backyard chai sessions, chai, as you know, is Indian tea. I bribed folks with chai. Chai sessions started to lead to a lot of meaningful takeaways for me. The biggest takeaway was that there was an overwhelming desire to come together as community. The second takeaway was there wasn't a platform like this at all, right? And third was there was a lot of work to be done around professional leadership development for South Asian women. And really, I think it enabled us to become better players in the broader community that we were all part of. So it wasn't, we're just trying to focus on a community niche. It really was about us becoming better community builders outside in the other communities as well that we were part of.
Could you just tell me, what does Neythri mean?
Neythri means female leader or guiding light in Sanskrit. We were very particular. We wanted a Sanskrit origin name for Neythri.
If I am a member of Neythri, what's that like? What as a member, what is that experience like for me as a member of the team?
I think to answer that question fairly and comprehensively, I have to sort of start. When we launched Neythri in March of 2020, we didn't expect that the world around us would change. We had no idea, right? Yeah. We had envisioned Neythri to be one way would start locally in Silicon Valley, because that's where my known network was large. My two co-founders are from the Bay Area as well. And we felt, we would create some playbooks here. And then once we felt we understood how to build this community organization, then we would start to look at other geographies. But of course, COVID happened, everything changed. We became virtual first platform very quickly, and Neythri has grown organically. We're now in 14 countries, and all of our programming is virtual. We also very quickly honed in on 4 pillars in terms of our focus area: professional leadership development, mentorship, which is one-on-one, as well as peer-to-peer mentorship circles we create, founders and funders. And the founders and funders program focus is primarily on South Asian female founders that are building venture scale tech-enabled companies. So, we are not focused on, for example, somebody, doing franchise business. So just building a business. It was very, very focused that we would start only with tech-enabled venture scale businesses, and then, and then broaden. And then the 4th program area is around social impact and community leadership. So those women that are focused on nonprofit careers or philanthropy, nonprofit boards, that would and community leadership, right? Whether it is serving on a city council or a school board, what are those kinds of what do those careers present? Why should one care? Bringing role models to come and talk about those topics. So we started out with these 4 program focus, and everything was virtual, and the community started to build, and membership was free, completely free. But now here we are, close to 2,000 members now. And we realized that we cannot continue to scale and sustain an organization like this that is doing stellar programming by an all-volunteer network. So today, all of our work is run through a 100-plus person volunteer network. These are all women who largely have a full-time job, but who volunteer their time at Neythri. And it's impossible to scale and sustain longer term. We realize that we are building something that has a clear product market fit in our language, right? And so in order to do this a lot more thoughtfully, to build value, to build sustainability and scale it, we've got to have some paid staff to enable us to scale the programs. So we just recently launched a paid tiered membership model. We have 3 tiers: Discovery Circle, which will continue to be free, and we call that sort of the window into Neythri. It's great for young professionals that are just starting out to be a part of Neythri without making a monetary contribution. And then next up, we have something called the Premier Circle, which is really for folks that want a lot more value out of Neythri, who want deeper connections, deeper meaning, who want access to our one-on-one mentorship program, and so on. And that's $100 a year. So very, very affordable. As I say, less than 2 cups of Starbucks coffee a month, right? That's what it takes.
Or tea.
Yes, or chai. Chai. We say chai, by the way, Chris. We don't say chai tea as Starbucks.
Yeah, no, don't say chai tea. I've learned that one.
And then we have a pretty steep step function for our third level called the leadership circle, which is primarily aimed at most senior women. We say, director level and above in larger companies, who really are looking at Neythri's membership not as a transactional membership, but one where they come to pay it forward, right?
Yeah.
To really pay back, to help foster this community. So they act as mentors. They get to participate in our board readiness program. We also have this incredible program that we did, a very successful pilot called the Neythri Executive Salons, which is a curated group of 8 to 10 women who meet at a regular cadence once every 6 weeks or so. These are moderated sessions that really focus on challenges that senior women face in the workforce. And this group that they meet with once every 6 weeks or so becomes their personal board of directors. So they can really be vulnerable within this group and can discuss challenges, get perspectives, get input, and help sort of grow.
I really like that idea because, you kind of you're meeting people where they're at, and you're providing something for everybody. And I like the fact that you've got sort of a curated small group like that, because I think that has a lot of value. I think there's value to the big organization, and there's value to sort of the smaller group as well.
That's exactly the point. You have the breadth to the different virtual events we do, but then you have the depth as well through these small curated sessions.
Well, and like you said, you've got product market fit, and I think that that the fact that you started in 2020, you're in 14 countries now, you have 2,000 members, really speaks to that quite effectively, right? So you've got Neythri going on. And kind of really getting a lot of traction, being very successful. But one of the things that I know that you said was very challenging was access to capital, right? And that was and continues to be a big challenge for many people, especially people kind of outside the sort of mainstream white male culture, right? So the way you dealt with that was like, well, I'm not, I'm just going to go fix that problem, right? And so you started your own venture capital group within Neythri. So could you tell me about? I mean, because I think there's a lot of mystery around venture capital for most people, right? And I think both from the like, what the heck is it, to the like how does it even work, and how do you even start it? So maybe you could kind of walk through like what you went through on that journey to build that organization.
Sure. Actually, I think you sort of hit the nail on the head. The whole notion of there's a lot of mystery around venture capital.
Yeah.
Right. So the Neythri Futures Fund began really from a desire to see South Asian women changing the landscape of venture, playing a role there. And just sort of a slight correction, the Neythri Futures Fund is a sister organization to Neythri, but distinct in itself. Okay. So it's not, it sort of didn't come from within Neythri, but we see them as sort of two distinct sister organizations.
Associated but parallel organizations.
Exactly. The name, of course, they share, and the focus on South Asian women as part of the mission is the common factor, but they each serve a completely distinct and different purpose. So the fund's mission, the Neythri Futures Fund's mission, is really to position South Asian women sort of front and center as key stakeholders and investors in the fund. And, I have dabbled quite a bit over the last 15 years or so as an investor, investing in tech-enabled venture-scale startups, right? And what I saw as part of that experience, if you look at the numbers, I mean, there's a lot of data out there, there are reports out there, right? Women make up just 4.9% of venture capital investors in the US. Wow. So it's an abysmal statistic, right? It's very, very clear that that poor female representation is really a significant deficit overall, and makes it really impossible for women to have influence in venture. And that, of course, has a trickle-down effect on female founders, because, again, there's enough data that says that female founders, by a large majority, are funded by female investors as well. And so my sort of thinking with the fund was, I have been on one side of that equation as a female entrepreneur, and I've seen how that worked and struggled trying to raise funding. And so my focus with the fund was really to address the other side first of that problem, which is the investor side, right? And so what I saw was a great opportunity to utilize the power and influence of the South Asian female network to effect change, right? And bring some sort of gender equity to both the founders and eventually the funders, and then eventually the founder side of that ecosystem, venture capital ecosystem. So really, our mission with the Neythri Futures Fund is to enable a lot more South Asian women to step into that investment ecosystem by making the world of venture capital far less intimidating, and to take out that mystery, as you mentioned earlier, right? So what we do is we provide access to a very supportive community of like-minded investors. We also provide access to highly curated training sessions, educational sessions that are really designed for anyone from, whether you're a seasoned investor or a first-time investor. So we have Angel Investor 101 workshops where 60% of the LPs in the Neythri Futures Fund have never invested before.
Before I get you too far, could you explain what an LP is?
Yes, an LP is really a glorified term. It stands for limited partner, and it really means an investor. Anybody that puts money into the fund is an LP.
Yeah, I think it's funny because I think people hear a lot of terms when we talk about venture capital, but I don't think a lot of people understand the difference between a GP and LP. Special purpose vehicles. All the different things that kind of go into the world of venture. Yep. So yeah, thank you for defining that for us.
And that's sort of exactly my point. And one of our commitment as part of the Neythri Futures Fund to our LPs and investors is that they will get access to training. They will come out of this experience really understanding that journey of an investor and how venture capital works. What is a term sheet? Most of them don't even know what a term sheet is, right? What does due diligence entail? How does one go about it? Is this a science or an art, right? Is this, how does valuations work? What is Series A? What is seed, pre-seed, right? How does a company qualify as a Series C investment? So all of those terminologies, constructs, etc., are sort of demystified. Yeah. Through our training sessions.
Well, so speaking of that, we talked about you're a general partner in this venture capital organization. You have limited partner investors that are putting money into it. And one of the things I think that's interesting about venture capital firms is that they kind of have a different methodology that they go for. I mean, certainly every firm invests in different industry verticals and has expertise in those things, which makes a lot of sense because you have to know what you're investing in, right? But I think the other piece of that's interesting is there's different firms that invest at different stages of a company, right? There's some that start at just seed capital for them, the A round, which is generally sort of a lower valuation kind of investment, then B, C, and D. You kind of, you're not the very seed, right? You're investing more in the A and B rounds. Is that correct? Or where do you where's your sweet spot?
So we went through a lot of thought in developing our investment thesis. And so we figured that given our mission focus, for the fund, given that the majority of our investors will be first-time LPs, first-time investors, we wanted to make sure that they start to see some early returns and not have to wait 7 to 8 to 10 years to see any form of return. And so that actually helped define some of our investment thesis as well. So our fund's investment thesis is we are largely stage agnostic. But that said, our sweet spot is Series A. So we'll do really anything we say. Our sort of official positioning is anything from late seed through pre-IPO.
Okay.
Right. But even with late seed, we will only invest where a lead investor is already in place. There is product and revenue traction. There is product market fit, essentially.
Right.
So we won't do, when it's just 2 women or 2 guys in a garage, with the idea on the back of a napkin. That's not what we will invest in. The team, of course, makes a big difference. We also have one of our criteria is that there is at least one female, either in the founding team, the executive team, or if it's a later stage company, on the board. Okay. So they have a decision-making role in the company. So that's one of our investment criteria. And in terms of sector, we largely focused on enterprise, B2B, SaaS, fintech, edtech, health tech. So tech-enabled. We stay away from consumer because, again, for me as well as my partner, I have a partner on the investing committee. Her name is Mythili Sankaran. The two of us make the final decisions. As far as investments go, both of us come from enterprise tech backgrounds. And so that's our sweet spot.
Yeah, well, invest in what you know, right?
Yes.
And I think it's interesting that, you've taken this approach and I think that it's, when you talk about, you don't want to get in the seed because, there's a lot of risk involved in that, and understanding like sort of the company's trajectory is very difficult. And I think it's really savvy of you guys to focus on things that are going to see some liquidity, in a reasonable amount of time, for investors who are maybe not used to, playing that whole long-term game of, 10x over 5, whatever, that whole thing. But what kind of, can you speak to some of the companies that you've invested in and like what they look like and where they're at?
So we've invested in some South Asian female-founded companies, as expected.
Yeah.
All of them are enterprise B2B focused. We have, I believe, 2 or 3 fintech companies, one of a cloud computing company, a couple of what we call DevOps, developer ops companies. Again, definitely a hot space for sure. Future of work is a big space, an interesting space for us because we think there's long-term ramifications in terms of how that develops. We haven't yet invested in a future of work company yet, but that's a space we're actively looking at and considering and would love to make an investment in a company in that space. We made 9 investments already.
That's pretty good.
The fund itself is 5 months old.
So you're pretty early on. I mean, that's and you've got one fund now.
Yeah, this is the first fund, and it's been an interesting journey because I started with very modest goals. 3 million. We can raise up to 10 million given the structure of the fund. If you want to have 249 LPs in the fund, you can only raise a maximum of 10. That's the SEC regulation. Right. And I wanted the 249 LPs because I wanted to make this as inclusive as possible and invite as many women that wanted to participate to be a part of this. So, I thought small checks, 3 million is what we would consider. So started out really, if you look at our brochure, pitch deck 1.0, it says 3 million. Very quickly, we started to see that we could get to 5 million. So that was interesting, we said, because now we can invest in a few more companies, maybe even do follow-on rounds in some of the winners. So, of course, got a little ahead of ourselves. We're now at close to 8.5. So now 10 million is our goal.
So,
but we only have, less than 10 spots left in LP spots left in the fund. So now we are very, very discerning. We're looking at only strategic investors that will write large checks.
So, and when you say so you raise this money, what size of investments are you making with that money?
It varies again, depending on the stage. We're doing anywhere from we'll do anywhere from 50K to 500K.
You started this organization with the Southeast Asian women. You started the fund, and so that's going to be the financial side of it. It seems like with both of you, all your founders come from a very heavy tech background. What does the breakup look like of the 2,000 members? Like, is it heavily skewed towards the tech industry? Do you have all kinds of different professional careers in that mix, as well as how about ages? Are you recruiting people from college in high school? Is that too young? Can you give me a little sense of how does that 2,000 kind of break down?
Yeah, no, great question. So if you look at our website and our mission statement, we're very, very particular and take great pride in saying that Neythri is a cross-generational, cross-industry community. And we take that actually very, very seriously. So if you look at our membership, it's interesting. About a third are what we call young professionals. So we don't work with college kids. We start around, you have to be at least 2 years out of college in the workforce before a professional community like this really starts to make sense. But that said, we don't say that you can't be a member if you are still in college. We have several young college folks that are members, so we don't sort of stop them. But we, in terms of our focus, it is, so the young professionals are anywhere from 2 years to less than 10 years of work experience. Then we have a third of our membership is what we call mid-career, so less than 10 to 20 plus years of work experience, and then an equal number are what we call senior professionals, the 25 plus years, but also more senior in both level and tenure.
Sure.
So it's interesting that it has sort of organically grown to be fairly equally distributed across these three distinct segments. It also helps us to curate our programs such that they address the distinct needs of these three segments. Mm-hmm. So, for example, most of our one-on-one mentorship mentees come from young professionals and mid-career. The mentors come from the senior professionals. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that has been fairly seamless, right? We also have more curated programs for the more senior folks. A little less than half come from the technology industry. But about a half come from diverse healthcare, professional services, real estate, manufacturing, all across the board. So very, very cross industry.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, one of the things that Chris and I've always been talking about is in our youth, when we started our professional careers, that network that we developed is it's the most, you don't realize how important your network is, and when you can carry on your network for years and years, and you have a group of people so Chris and I, when I have questions, I'm going to a guy like Chris and I just want to bounce things off of him, and he does have different perspectives, right? And so to have people with different opinions, different experiences, different backgrounds from that perspective, I think is extremely helpful. And for the reason why I asked you about where they are in their experiences, if young South Asian kids can join an organization like yours early in their career, they can get so much benefit for it for multiple decades for them. It'd be very special. So I love the fact that you maybe didn't mean to, but you just got a really good, diverse group of women, which is awesome.
I won't say we didn't mean to. It was fairly intentional because right at the outset, I was very, very clear. I have 2 young girls. So for me, they sort of serve as the true north, right, in a lot of the work I do around role modelship. and behavior. And so creating a cross-generational community was very, very important. In fact, one of my co-founders is a young millennial. And so when I approached her, it was very much with the intention of building a cross-generational community.
Yeah. So the millennials have a voice. That's great.
Yes.
Well, and I think that diversity is really important because you need to hear, you need to hear the people who built the world we currently live in, and you have to, have the voice of the people who are building the world we're going to live in, right?
Both are very important.
Yeah. Yeah. So if somebody was looking was looking for funding, how should they reach out to you, and what would be the process there?
Yeah, so our investment thesis is on the website, NeythriFuturesFund.com. We also have a founder submission form.
Okay.
Where we ask for specific questions. They submit the pitch deck as well. We have a team that looks at it, the back end. And if we feel there's a fit, we will reach out to the founder and set up some time to chat and get to know them further and figure out, if it aligns with our thesis. But if not, we'll let them know. But, we also want to go beyond that, especially if it's, a female founder, is to connect them with other resources, right, within the community. It may or may not be aligned with the Neythri Futures Fund for investment, but the hope is that we can help connect them with others that might align better.
Well, and I know that's one of the things that makes us a successful GP successful is, having that broader network to help connect people, and because, it helps your investing if you're connecting other people, and, that network, like Sandesh was talking about, is really important for that sort of thing. And on that front, if somebody wants to be part of your fund, wants to be an LP in your fund, what would be the process for that?
Is to write to me, because we can only accept accredited investors.
Sure.
As LPs in the fund, so you can't just sort of fill out a form necessarily. So the best place to start is to write to me at mythili@NeythriFuturesFund.com, and then I respond to every email.
Excellent. Well, and just, because I think we've heard the term accredited investor before. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that means you have to be earning $200,000 as an individual, $300,000 as a family, or have $1 million in assets. Is that
correct?
That's sort of
not counting your primary residence.
Okay. So just in case you want to invest and you're not sure if you're accredited or not. But that's great. And so finally, if somebody wanted to join your organization, where should they go?
Our website, neythri.org/join. It provides details, benefits about the 3 circles that I mentioned, the Discovery Premium Leadership Circle, and they can simply join from there.
And I'll put the link to that in the description below. So if you want to join, make sure you check that out. Well, this has actually been absolutely fascinating stuff, and I think your journey is really encouraging, and it's a very cool story, and the things you've done and the kind of where you've gotten to in such a short time is pretty impressive. So congratulations on your success, and thank you so much for sharing your time with us. We really appreciate it.
No, thank you both. It's a privilege, right, to be able to share one's journey and talk about the work that one is passionate about. So thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Thanks for watching. I would love to hear from you in the comments section below. And if you like what you saw, please give us a like and consider subscribing. And I will see you in the next video.